Welcome back, Seekers and Saints, to Fire in the Bones vlog, and this is referring back to the sermon of the 8th of October, 2023. And in that sermon, Pastor Shane was talking about church idols. More specifically, why they get in the way of why it becomes so hard to evangelize. Let me go back a little bit. So in it, he gives a few reasons why it's difficult to evangelize for the modern church, and one is ideological. The church is now in an era where everybody likes to have their own truth, their own emotional truth. I'm not going to talk about that so much today. Pastor Shane did that a little bit. Next was idolatry. This is the one that he dug deep into. Different kinds of idols for the church. Put a pin in that. Because that is going to be today's topic. Church idols. Now, Pastor Shane talked about other idols, things that could be perfectly good, but that we let get in the way of evangelism. But he talked about it at an individual level. I want to talk about it at the church level. What kind of idols do we have in the church? Now, some of you might be immediately thinking, oh, church idols, you mean like statues of Virgin Mary or icons, like the Catholic or Orthodox churches have. Well, that definitely counts, yes, but that's not where I'm going to go. I'm going to go with what we here at Parham Heights Baptist Church or any other church like that, any other evangelical church may have. And there's a few things I'm going to cover. I'm going to have 5 different idols that can get in the way of our evangelical approach. First, getting focused on fighting the bad. What do I mean by that? Maybe we get so worked up about stopping all the evil out there. And that could be both spiritual or worldly. It could be worried about, oh, we got to get there and we have to vote for this person. We could get deeply involved in the politics of some matter. And although voting is good and we should vote morally, we can easily turn the pulpit into a platform. And then Jesus is immediately shoved out. Or maybe we get really into spiritual things, fighting demons. I've heard so many stories of people who get so hooked on learning about fighting false teachings and fighting demons that we stop thinking about, all right, well, what are we supposed to be promoting? You know, I go on the Power Mission trip, men's ministry to the Texas-Mexico border, and one of the missionaries that come with us, a guy by the name of Pat Smelling, really great guy, he came from an occult background before he became a Christian. And after he was a Christian, one of the things he did was he would go around to churches telling them about how Satanists work and the occult and doing all of this. And one day it just occurred to him, I'm not telling people about Jesus, am I? I'm telling them about Satan or whatever pagan ideology. And he stopped. So how often do we do that? The second idol could be how we do church. I don't think I need to go into too much about this, but if you're new to Parham Heights Baptist, check out a sermon series from years ago called Who Stole My Church, based around the same book. It is eye-opening. But we can make an idol about the way we do church. I don't want to change. I want my pews, not chairs. I want my music this way, not this way. I want my ministry run this way, not this way. It all comes down to, one could argue that idol is an idol of self. I want my way. We stop asking what works for evangelical purposes and start asking what works for me. The third idol that can happen is church functions. Now, give me a minute here. Church functions meaning things like taking care of the building, ministries, activities. These are all good things and honestly necessary things, especially when it comes to logistics. But we can easily decide that our church function or ministry is the most important thing in the world. You know, if you go to The Simpsons, there's the old pastor's wife, Helen Lovejoy, that just about every moment she said something, someone criticized or did something questionable, she would just scream, "Somebody please think of the children!" Is that you? Every time someone says we might have to cut something from this budget to help this other thing, will someone please think of the... That's the litmus test. Is your function so important that you can't let it go, that you can't change it, you can't lower it. It's the most important thing in the church at that moment. That can be an idol. Another idol can be actual self, holier than thou syndrome. Oh, well, church doesn't have to change because I am holy, not these new people that just walked in. Do I need to say a lot about being a Pharisee? The final point I want to go at is our approach. Are we addicted to how we present the gospel? Decades ago, the Billy Graham Bridge, I like to call it, with the cross, the chasm, was a fine system. And honestly, it still is a fine representation. But its chance of success has lost, it's been numbed a little bit. It's been blunted. Because, like we mentioned earlier with postmodernism, first you got to get someone to accept they're a sinner and not good enough. If they can't even recognize that, then the Billy Graham Bridge is nothing. We've got to be able to flip the script. Matt over in our youth ministry, the leader in our youth ministry, is having us read this book, Flip the Script. And it's a really great book about how modern day evangelism to young people, Gen Z and younger, is completely different than what it was even just a mere 20 years ago. 30 years ago was different. The programs work differently. You could assume that people knew who God was or believed in God. There was some basis to go on. Now, that's all out the window. Now you have to take a completely different approach. Paul says in 1 Corinthians 9, to the weak I became weak so that I might win the weak. I've become all things to all people so that I may be, by any means, I might save some. This doesn't mean you adapt a sinful ideology, but rather what it means is you don't get addicted to your method of introducing the gospel. If the Billy Graham Bridge isn't working anymore, you find something else. Because at the end of the day, our job is to go and make disciples. The how of it is going to change. And when you say, my method's the best and the reason it's not working is because all these other people, you've made an idol of yourself and your method. So here's the conclusion of the matter. For any of these idols, church cannot be an idol. It must not be an idol. God changes things, and so must we. That's it for today on Fire in the Bones. Like I said, if you haven't seen the sermon from the 8th, go back and listen to that, and it'll help you out a lot with today. Otherwise, I'll see you next week.